Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Brian and Jack with Simpleman's Comics, and we're back with episode 2 of Simpleman's Comics and Friends, that flagship podcast on our channel. Yes, we have the video up here, but this is also that audio version, so make sure you check out that Simpleman's Comics podcast wherever your podcasts are found. We got a great show tonight. We got some great topics. We also have some great panelists, don't we, Jack?
That's right. Now, we're always talking about from the retailer perspective, but this time we're taking it inside because to give you that retail perspective, we've got Ben from Black Cape Comics here joining us as a guest this week.
How's it going, guys? Benjamin, Black Cape Comics. Had my shop for a couple of years now. We've been online for most of that, but we're a community-based retail store out of Waterville, Maine. We do have a very good e-commerce site online, and we just recently started our own YouTube channel. Just basically to kind of showcase some of the stuff that we have going on. We're not looking to get YouTube famous or anything like that, but it's just another way to communicate with you guys. And I'm happy to be here, and hopefully I can provide some good input.
Now, he's underselling himself because those Black Cape Comics exclusive independent comics variants have been kind of the talk of the market over the last year. But he mentioned YouTube famous, and that brings me to our next guest, one of my favorite YouTubers out there, sometimes controversial, but it's Nico from Nico Time.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Brian, for having me. I believe you might be the only person who thinks I'm famous, but it's really good to be here.
So those are the panelists. We got a great indie comic shop. We say indie because he's known for the indies with Ben at Black Cape Comics. So if you're looking for those indies, definitely check out Black Cape Comics. Or if you're looking for comics in general, check out his shop at blackcapecomics.com. And, of course, Nico Time, one of our favorites, longtime friends in the comic book community. Definitely check out his YouTube channel. But with that being said, let's go and put those topics up on the screen right now that we're going to get into tonight. Starting with that first one, we've heard a lot of rumors lately that DC Comics might be in trouble. There's also rumors that AT&T does want to get into publishing business, and we heard that Disney might buy them out. Could you see Marvel picking up DC Comics, or do you think DC will keep what they have? How do you see this playing out? Do you think there's anything to this rumor? Ben, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Man, you know what? Since I opened the store just a couple years ago, I've heard this pretty much since day one. Will it ever happen? Maybe. I mean, anything's possible, right? I don't see it happening anytime soon. And if anything like that does happen, it's up to DC. Marvel will purchase and Disney, for that matter, will purchase anything that people will let them purchase. I mean, obviously it's in DC's hands, and I think they're trying to make one good last ditch effort. I've heard some rumors that this 5G that they've got going on with this next generation may or may not happen. I think they are going to try their best to make it happen. If that was to fall on its face, I think maybe that might be their last, hurrah. But I mean, they've been doing some good things lately. I mean, you look at Punchline, they've been trying to put something to juice this market up. And I think Punchline is just the start of some things to come. So we'll see, I guess.
So one thing also you always hear a lot, especially in a bunch of different businesses, you often hear too big to fail. Nico, what are your thoughts on this whole process?
I think it's kind of silly. It's about as probable as when someone makes a joke about, Bob's going to steal your girlfriend. Warner Media is too big to be concerned with selling the publishing rights to their cheapest creative venture, period. DC Comics operates as both a built-in storyboard and focus group for future television and theatrical projects. Doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a lot of hot air.
Yeah, I like what Nico just said, because we brought that up before, that, I've heard multiple people within the comic book industry from various different publishers mention when they're dealing with Hollywood people and they're looking at like options for independent comics, quite often what they hear is that the reality is the cheapest research and development out there is comic books. That's why optioning properties happens at such a frequency today. And that's also why I can't really picture Marvel or DC ever really worrying too much about the bottom line, as long as the companies are able to be efficient and stay afloat. I think that the end game of what they're doing, no pun intended, is trying to release these, blockbuster movies. And while Warner may have, they may have had mixed success with that, I don't see the publishing side really pushing the needle. I think, and I also don't know where all this is coming from. We see these rumors being kind of consistent, that people hear that AT&T, but we haven't heard like an AT&T spokesman say that they're getting on the publishing business, or we haven't heard any of that sort of talk. So sometimes I think it's wishful thinking. It's fantasy booking, like in wrestling.
I agree. I think DC Comics is here to stay. I think if AT&T does want to be in the publishing business, I think they've done some bad hires, and maybe they should hire a person that can run DC Comics the way it should be run and get those publishing rights out there. I don't see DC hurting. I think from a fan base it's hurting, but if you look at their sales figures, it seems to always be up there with the big two. I mean, you're always going to sell Batman comics. You're always going to sell Wonder Woman, Superman. Fans come and go. They might not like a storyline, but we've seen that with Marvel too. Like 5 years ago was different. People were loving Snyder's Batman run. They were hating a lot of the Marvel books, but now we're seeing a lot of Marvel fans and a lot of DC hate. And I don't think Disney's going to buy it. I think each time they swallow up a big business, they get more and more flack for it, for being that monopoly and owning stuff like that. I have a master's in cybersecurity, not business admin, but I've listened to that Bob Iger CEO book because I don't like to read. I listened to the book, and he was talking about how ultimately the last one, the Fox merger, was hard to get by. You saw Comcast almost come in and swoop it in. So I think if AT&T does get rid of it, I don't think it's going to be Disney or Marvel that picks it up. And like we talked before, Jack, I think they might license those characters out for people to use them, but ultimately Warner Brothers and DC or AT&T will still own them.
Yeah, but that's some people's argument, is that then Marvel would license those characters to use within their, comic books and the publishing. And also it's fair to point out that a lot of people are pointing at this due to some of like the teases in the Donny Cates Thor run and things like that. The Dr. Manhattan of the book, the Watchmen, the Doomsday Clock stuff. But that's again, I think it's wishful thinking.
Besides, we got John Constantine on the panel right now down there in the lower corner with the shirt and tie on.
I only wish I was that cool.
Yeah, I like your guys' take on this. I mean, as a business, as long as something is getting you some sort of publicity or like a free think tank, I like that idea. On the flip side, if the overhead company is hurting, it's immediately going to be looking for, well, where can I save a buck? And ultimately, if DC, the publishing side of things, has continued to be any sort of dead weight at all, it might be something they'll look at, but looking at it as an asset beyond just sheer dollars, as a free think tank, a free storyboard, I absolutely see the value in that. So looking at it at a business perspective, it's a really good point. I don't think I would have thought of, actually.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by Warner Media and DC Comics generally. I can't tell you how many times I've told myself, like, multinational corporations don't lose money. They don't miss opportunities. It's just a matter of time before they turn it around. And then DC streaming came, and well, that didn't work. Suicide Squad, that didn't work. This new Harley movie, well, that didn't work. Even when they do produce really quality content, right? Swamp Thing, canceled. The Harley animated series, nobody watches. So that kind of perplexes me. At the same time, I see people, who are not comic book people, for lack of a better description, women particularly, tell me that they loved Birds of Prey. It was their favorite movie, and I'm just like, what's happening? So I've not quite been able to really grasp what's going on with DC properties. It appears to me that neither has Warner Media. So I'll be real interested to see what James Gunn does with the Suicide Squad relaunch. I'm real bullish on those characters. The problem is nailing down who's who and what's what. But I think nobody's paying attention to him, and I believe in James Gunn as much as I believe in Kevin Feige. I think that guy's got the magic touch. I've been a fan since Lollipop Chainsaw.
That James Gunn hire to me reminds me of what you see in NFL when a guy gets cut and the division rival scoops him up.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm excited for James Gunn's Suicide Squad, that's for sure. Next thing we're going to discuss on this podcast is we just saw news that recently Emerald City Comicon, we saw a lot of talent kind of canceling flights, canceling tables, canceling because of this coronavirus. Ultimately, they decided to, at first they canceled the con, but now it's postponed to later in the summer. How do you guys feel about this coronavirus? Do you think it's going to affect other comic conventions that are coming up in the near term? But I'm anxious to hear everyone's thoughts on how they're feeling about the coronavirus and what's going on and how it's affecting the comic community. Ben, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I actually just got back from C2E2, and this was our first big con we went to. We've been to a bunch of local ones, but honestly, that doesn't count when you think about a big convention. And I suffered when I got back. I actually had what they call the con crud. I didn't get tested for the corona or anything, but man, that's legit as far as getting sick after these cons. So I can see if this is a real, and I'm not going to get into the science of it. I don't know really much about it, to tell you the truth, but I could understand where if it was prevalent in that area, how easily something like that could spread. So I understand the concern. As far as how bad it actually is, I don't know. But having that experience going now to a big con and the interaction you have, I can easily see the logistics of why these big conventions of any kind, not even just comics, are kind of a no-go. It is a little worrisome. It was our first big con, and we're getting ready to go to ACE here in Boston in just a couple of weeks. And it did have an impact. We had a lot of big-time stars who didn't make it to C2E2, including Francesco Mattina, including in Hughley, and another handful of people who were in no-fly zones where they weren't allowed to come. And Midtown actually pulled out of the convention entirely at the last second. So late, in fact, that half the staff didn't even know they weren't coming. People were trying to get, moved around to figure out where they were, and they couldn't find them. And that's because at the last second, everyone was like, yeah, we can't go. So it does have a big impact on the con itself. So just entering as a new business, getting ready to go to these conventions, bad timing for us. So I guess that's all I got on that.
What about you, Nico?
Like Ben, I don't claim to be a infectious disease expert. I did talk a little bit about this in this week's weekend update on comicbookspeculation.com because it's something I find fascinating. I don't know that it necessarily matters, at least initially, whether or not there's any real risk to going to a comic book convention, big or small, and contracting the coronavirus. I mean, it's really just a matter of the perceived risk. So certainly there's actual deaths in Washington state. I mean, and I sort of addressed some of those real concerns in my little short couple of paragraphs, but the question for me is whether or not there will be a perceived risk by con attendees such that they won't be planning for the vacation destination getaway in, Heroes Con or Baltimore. As somebody who doesn't make it to a lot of large conventions, but manage to be infected by whatever the communicable disease that was passed around at Baltimore this year, I can assure you that it is unpleasant. I was at a small con in Pittsburgh this weekend and shook one hand by accident, had somebody offer to bump feet with me. And, there was a genuine concern among vendors and people in attendance. But it certainly didn't slow down attendance. The place was butts to nut. I don't know if I can say that on your show, but I mean, it was wall to wall with people. Certainly they were spending dollars. If it does have a substantial impact on con attendance, my next question is, does that mean smaller cons will do better? Does that mean that the box office results are going to be worse than the television for Marvel, that we should be investing our dollars in TV properties? Because we all know that, like, what collectors focus on, the prices grow. And then similarly, does that mean that we're going to see more sales on Instagram and Facebook and eBay in the short term? And then what would be the longer term effect of that as people start to spend more time doing other things? I think if this thing really materializes and has an impact on the economy adversely, if we're not making widgets in China and there's even a tinge of recession, that can hurt the bottom dollar for a lot of comic collectors and investors and a lot of shops. And that's unfortunate, but it's something I've got my eye on real close.
See, that's exactly why we brought my man Nico on here, because he brought up a couple of things I wouldn't even think about. I was really thinking about this very linearly about Emerald City Comicon, and I think I come from the perspective of somebody who is about to attend a convention on the West Coast and desperately does not want to see it get canceled. And so I think a lot of my opinion stems from that, because like those guys, I mean, I'm the worst person to make a political statement, and I don't know a thing about Corona other than what is everyone else has seen on TV. But the reality is, we don't know how long this is going to last for. So the question really becomes, how much impact beyond this is it going to have? And Nico brought up things that I didn't even think about, like movie attendance, which is an amazing point. People generally get afraid of these things, especially the more they're being talked about. So my reaction to it is, it's the flu from what I can see. I'm more or less like, okay, be careful, but let's keep living. But I know that the general population does not feel that way. And it is also tough, because I would have made this argument real difficult yesterday. But today, both of my kids came down with the flu. So it's out there. But, I think this is going to be a topic to pay attention to. I also want to say, check out that weekend update on comicspeculation.com. There is a shortage of comic book content produced on the weekends consistently. So, I know a lot of you guys are getting all your stuff Monday through Friday, but check that out on the weekends for sure, because, the whole community is a little dry on the weekends.
Yeah, I'm kind of baffled by the whole situation with the coronavirus. I mean, it's everywhere right now. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm also curious why toilet paper. I mean, I understand, and we act like all of a sudden it's now important to wash your hands. But I mean, I understand. Yes, it's more important now because the so-called pandemic. And I don't fault anyone. I mean, it's the amount of risk that you're willing to accept or you're willing to take, right? So if you feel like it's too much of a risk for you to go, that's fine. And as so many of those pulled out, they had no other choice pretty much rather than to postpone the con. So me personally, I'm going to wash my hands and hope that these conventions keep going on. And I'm going to show up in, full mop gear if I have to. If anyone's military veteran, they know what I'm talking about, the whole
I'll have
hazmat suits and nuclear, biological, chemical warfare suits. But either way, it's something that everyone's talking about right now. You're seeing it on Twitter. You're seeing it on, even at church this week, instead of, greeting everyone in the pew, you're just giving, high fives, thumbs up, elbow bumps. But I'm anxious to see where this goes.
Yeah, I don't want to freak everybody out, but everybody at the convention's worried about handshakes and things.
Yeah, wash your ass. Start with washing your ass.
The dirtiest thing at the convention is those bags and boards. When you're flipping through those short boxes, you got to realize, like, every human being has coughed on their hands, ate, went to the bathroom, then put their hands in those boxes, touched those very same books. Some dealers have had those books bagged and boarded for a couple years and toted them around the country. So, yeah, there's a lot to just wash your hands a lot at a comic book convention.
Like,
We always use fresh bags and boards as much as we can.
after every comic.
And we'll have free hand sanitizer at our booth. So make sure you come see us at Ace.
Why do conventions, not all the time, but at least once during the convention, smell like a morgue?
Death.
Oh.
It's potent.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of people in a spot. I don't know. I'd rather smell like Axe body spray than
spray other people
spray.
with Axe.
But as the community has become more prevalent publicly in pop culture, you would have thought there would have been a hygiene renaissance within the community that just never seemed to take place.
You got all types of folks at comic conventions. That's what makes conventions great at the same time. So, but next one we're going to talk about is, this has come up in the news before. We're talking about Francesco Mattina. Not too long ago, a couple years ago, he was accused of stealing other artists' art. And it's come up again. We got Alex Garner, who has a Nova cover that says that Francesco Matina copied it for his Flash 750 cover. What do you guys think about this? Do you think it's something to be really concerned of? It's the second time we heard. How do you feel about this? I think it's prevalent in the industry. I don't think it's just this person, but he seems to be getting the news cycle. What do you think about it, Ben?
I think he's an easy target. I don't really have a super strong opinion one way or another. One of my employees, Brandon, is a huge Francesco Matina fan. So was this particular piece that brought up stolen? I don't know. I mean, I definitely can see some resemblances. I think the one everyone could point to, I believe it was a Punisher cover where they did like an overlay, and it was like almost so obvious that at least the gun, if nothing else, was pretty much traced. Other than that, a lot of these other examples that people have pointed to, I think are pretty like arguable. I'm not saying that he did or didn't, but I think he's just kind of an easy target right now. I think a lot of these artists nowadays use at least references, if not other pieces, as a strong reference nowadays. The unfortunate thing about it, if it is true, is this dude is insanely talented. I don't think anyone would argue his talent level. I mean, he sells covers, whether you like him or not. He sells an insane amount of covers. He's got, just some of the best covers out there. Stores, exclusives love using him. DC clearly has loved using him, and everything he's put out, it's been amazing. So, I mean, I personally, like I said, don't really have much opinion on it. I like most of his art. What really annoys me more than anything, and everyone has the right to do what they want to do, is his lack of response on it. I feel like if he came out and just addressed it and said, hey, this is what I'm doing, this isn't what I'm doing, I think it would put a lot of people at ease. But the fact that, he just refuses to enter the spotlight and just even put out a simple statement, I think gets people worked up about it. I haven't seen anyone not buying covers specifically because of it. I've seen a lot of yelling online about it, and I could understand more as an artist than a consumer being upset by it. As an artist, these guys are grinding and trying their very best to be put in the spotlight. So to see someone else potentially ripping off your work and getting glory because of it would be extremely frustrating. But as a consumer, I mean, I don't think anyone is really... I don't have anyone coming in my store going, I'm not buying that cover, Matina did it. People are usually, that's sick. They don't give a crap how he did it, whatever. So I think business-wise, I don't think anyone cares. I could see where artists are getting frustrated. My opinion, I honestly, I'm not even saying that just because I'm a store. I really don't. I like his art. I think if it started becoming more blatant and more obvious, like that Punisher one, I would definitely reverse that statement. But I haven't really seen, other than that one piece, anything definitive that like oh yeah, he's ripping off everyone kind of thing. So
So given the opportunity, if the price was right now for you, you'd have no problem doing a Matina Black Cape exclusive.
and now you see, now you're saying, would I put my name on it? That's a different thing.
Gotcha.
I probably couldn't afford it. B, I don't know. You know, that's something now where I have to reflect on, does the market would accept me now using him? And I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know if I would or not.
Yeah, I like, that's why I like having Ben on the panel, because Ben has the comic book fan opinion, but then you also have to take of the market, I say me, him as a
Yeah.
owning a comic store business, and what, you got to think about other people's opinions at that time, because it's going to affect your bottom line, right?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to honk my own horn or anything, but I have spent probably more time than, I don't know about every shop, but certainly the majority of these shops thinking about not only the books I'm doing, but who's doing them. And not so much on a Matina level, but does it make sense having this person on this cover? Like one I was actually a little disappointed with that didn't do as hot was our Folklords cover. I thought long and hard about that. I read that book probably 2 or 3 months before it got published, and I was really excited about it, and I thought it was going to be a pretty big hit. And I think overall it did do well, the book itself. But I ended up
That's
taking
the Drew Zucker cover, right?
Yeah, Drew Zucker, who did Canto, who I probably should have done the interiors of that book, not only the cover. I mean, he just did a really nice piece that fit the story perfectly, and I do that with every cover. I think about the story. I think about whose style is going to fit it well. I obviously use one of my guys, Esteban Salinas, often because we have a good relationship. But I also don't just put him on anything either. The same goes for the rest of the artists and stuff that I've used. So yeah, I put a lot of thought into the whole picture. And if I was to use someone like Francesco Mattina, that is something I would consider. Is his name going to put some controversy on it? I think sales wise, there's more people who want his stuff that don't want his stuff. But it's beyond even just that cover. It could potentially tarnish what people have respect for what we do. So if I'm, essentially going for like a cash grab because he's got, good art or marketable art, people might think, oh, well, he's just using a cash grab. He no longer has that integrity. So yeah, it is something probably I'd have to think about. Yeah. And that one short.
Nico, what are your thoughts on the whole Matina art?
Well, I'm not an expert on intellectual property, much like I'm not an infectious disease expert. But a couple of things I find interesting. One, why haven't any of the individuals who allege that Matina has appropriated unlawfully their intellectual property filed a civil action against him and the publishers? Two, why hasn't he filed a defamation of character lawsuit against those who are alleging that he is indiscriminately appropriating their intellectual property unlawfully? And three, what's kind of like the boundaries on this stuff? I think we're in a real interesting area, but it's a legal issue. And, I don't know where those bright lines are drawn, whether or not it's a jury determination, what is pornography? You know it when you see it, because we're dealing with art. I think what's even more interesting is kind of like the state of art in modern comics, where we see cover artists receiving exponentially more money than people who do sequential art, and a lot of longtime collectors longing for guys like Jim Lee, even Greg Capullo, who were able to crank out some of the best sequential art that any of us, I think, have ever seen. So, those are just kind of like the things that I'm thinking about. I didn't get a lot of time to look at the Flash Nova photos. You were kind enough to provide those to me, but apparently I missed the CDR article. Shame on me. But had I stared at them for hours, I don't know that I would have been able to come up with some sort of like finite answer, or really came to a conclusion that like, well, that's morally reprehensible, that's not, and these are the factors or whatever that I made my decision by. There's always, for example, like the Ry-Zero Punisher kind of deal, and a lot of things that over the course of comics people can point to as those kind of examples to either condemn or exonerate those who later down the line are accused of comparable things. But I can't necessarily say that I've got a real vested interest in any of it, so I haven't spent a lot of time taking a look at it or made any hard or fast opinions about it. I will tell you one thing, though. It's hurt Matina's books to some extent. Not that the incentive variant market isn't a little soft right now, at least compared to what it once was. But for me, that is more of a buying opportunity than anything else. I think a lot of those books that I wouldn't have shelled out the cash for are now getting closer to a dollar figure that makes sense to me.
So I've kind of run the spectrum on my opinion on this. As a fellow Italian, I love all the Italian artists. So I will say, not guilty until proven innocent for my man Mattina. But at the same point, as somebody who pledges on this channel to keep it real, he did that shit, and he's always done it. And it's difficult because you can look at the Alex Garner one. That one's tough, right? That one, you could, like Nico said, you could look at that all day. You could go back and forth. I kind of trust Alex Garner with what he's saying, where if you put it digitally into the computer and you look at it from like a reverse, it's the same image. So I get that. If you go back and look at his history from, you were talking about the Punisher thing, Ben, the Punisher rendering that he copied for Batman, I think it's Grim Knight. That was actually a Frankie's Comics variant, who's a channel sponsor in all transparency of our channel. Now, I don't want to speak for Kevin at Frankie's, but you look at the effect this has had on Mattina. Mattina was doing regular store exclusives, like consistent store exclusives, specifically with Frankie's. You are not seeing Mattina's name pop up in store exclusives that frequently. Where you're seeing it quite often is Spawn, and Spawn is a one kind of man island, right? Todd McFarlane runs all things that are Spawn. So Todd McFarlane's opinion is really the only thing that matters when it comes to Mattina's work on Spawn. The only places Mattina really has gotten work since this whole thing started is DC Comics on their Cover B program and the Spawn stuff. Furthermore, his DC Cover Bs, that's where he's gotten the kind of backlash from the fellow artists, is they've been mad at DC for employing him. But I do agree with what Nico says. We haven't seen any civil action, at least publicly. So it's difficult. But yeah, Mattina's lost immensely. He's lost out a lot of work. We haven't seen him work with Marvel since the whole thing happened. We haven't seen his presence at conventions. He had a social media presence, Instagram, Twitter at the time. That's all gone. He was represented by a company that in the United States that managed his autograph signings, that worked as kind of like a middleman to get him exclusive covers for various stores. That contract went away. And this all happened kind of overnight. And it was a slew of things and a bunch of Bleeding Cool articles. Bleeding Cool is not my favorite source, but when they do report something, it can make waves in the community. So it was a combination of like a Magneto statue, the real bad one was the Lee Hyung Lee. He took like a Dynamite cover and basically turned it into is that the Fan Expo Venom? Yeah, the Venom cover. I mean, that's real. That was like a real egregious one that like you really couldn't argue that. But again, the thing that really drives me kind of nuts, but it piques my curiosity at the same point, and I would love for anyone in the comics community to get a real interview with Matina to ask him, like, with all the times you've been caught and all the things that you've lost, and how talented we all know he is, which is the only reason why he's even maintained a shred of a name in the business. He'd be excommunicated if it wasn't for the fact that he is so talented. Why continue to push it unless you feel like at the end of the day you're so talented that people aren't going to care? But he's not the only one, because we have to bring up that the Marvel Zombies guy. What's his name? Arthur, whatever. Sundian. There you go. I would never have pronounced that right. But he's another one who consistently has been caught and defiantly continues to just proceed as usual, and the people get angry, but the book sold. That Joker book that he did, the Deceased book, he got so much shit for that, but yet the book was a big winner.
Yeah, so definitely agree with a lot of those points, and the big thing is the egregious stuff for me, when it's so blatant, like that Grim Knight one, where it's just you can't argue against it. Not only that you can't argue a different type of cover, but like it's almost a photocopy. Those are the types of things where I think the punishment then needs to get laid down. I would imagine the reason that there hasn't been any sort of lawsuits is it would be incredibly hard to argue either way in court, even bringing up because what's artistic, the interpretation on it. If you put a new brush stroke over it, is it a new piece of art kind of thing? So I think legally it would be extremely hard to argue. And so that's probably my guess. I don't really know that for sure. But yeah, Matina definitely took a big hit after, particularly around that Grim Knight, that Bleeding Pool. But as a retailer, I'm seeing his name all over my order forms. I just did an initial order where instead of maybe one cover from DC, there was like 8. And it's been picking up over the past 2 or 3 months on our order forms for Matina covers. So his stock, I don't know if maybe people are getting over it, or if maybe DC is just saying whatever, people are still buying it, let's just start giving them work again. Maybe that starts translating into stores picking him back up, because you're right, the stores stopped using him almost completely, and then there was a few here and there. But yeah, I think you see him start to come back. And how many more times can you have a egregious cover before they finally say, I don't care how talented you are, like, this is stupid? So plus, I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Plus, you gotta look at it. It's the cover B, which is $3.99. It's a low buy-in, so of course people are gonna buy it up. But also think outside of that. I mean, we're aware of who the person is, but think about the normal, everyday.
Right.
Not your big comic book fan, but someone comes in or sees something and is like, that's a cool cover. They don't even know who did it. They're just gonna buy it regardless. But I wonder if this would be the same. I mean, Jack, you kind of touched on it. If Matina didn't have the notoriety that he did, would it still be as big of an issue? I'm sure it would. It just wouldn't be as public, I bet. But I'm not in the art industry. I know there's a lot of people out there that, I mean, just like every other industry people are in, inside your peer group, if you betray one of those peer groups, it's kind of hard to earn that trust back.
Yeah,
but he's the Mark McGuire of comics at the end of the day. Like, cheating, we all know he's cheating, but at the end of the day, sometimes, it's good for the game, and so people kind of tend to look the other way because some of the books have made waves.
I will say, I mean, I'll fully admit that I still buy Matina covers if I look at the cover and go, man, that's a really cool cover, and it's $3.99 or $4.99, whatever cardstock variant. If I like it, I'm buying it, because what do we always say? Buy what you like.
Absolutely. Motto of my life. And same thing with all my comic collectors. Sometimes I get new people in and, I haven't been collecting in how many ever years, what should I get? What were you collecting back in the day? What do you like to pick up? I hate pushing things that people don't like because it's whatever's hot. The last thing someone wants to see when they look back at their collection is, why do I have half of this. This doesn't make any sense. You want to look at your collection and go, oh yeah, I remember picking that up. So buy what you like. I like it.
And you're always going to have both sides of that, just like you have both sides of a bunch of other things. And I mean, Mike Vick. I mean, people like Mike Vick still. People don't like Mike Vick. But it's something to talk about, and people are buzzed about it. I mean, CBR's running articles on it again. So, and I'm a huge fan of Alex Garner as well. So I love his covers. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Matina kind of stays, drops, or we had him on the cold this past week on 3 Up, 3 Down. But like Nico said, it presents great buying opportunities if you're into those books. Then the last topic that we want to talk about tonight is, speaking of $3.99, $4.99 with Matina. Recently, you mentioned Punchline earlier. We're seeing Batman's got a huge resurgence. I mean, it's probably one of the most popular titles right now. Love James Tynion's run, but that's not why it's hot. It's because of that Punchline character. We're starting to see or hear from people on New Comic Book Day, on release day. They're going to get their Batman issue, and they get to the comic book store, and they've escalated or elevated the price up to almost the secondary market or whatever it's selling for or going for on eBay. This is going to be I'm anxious to hear your response, but
looking at me.
How do you feel about this? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it, hey, it's capitalism at its best? You know, vote with your dollar. But either way, let's hear everyone's opinions. We're going to start with you, of course, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be, not as a cop-out, the fortunate one or unfortunate, depending on how you want to look at it, that I didn't just order 600 copies of Batman 89. Boy, don't I always seem to miss on these ones. I never seem to know what's going to be hot. So for me in my shop, we only ordered a small handful. We always do basically just a couple covers over whatever our pull list is. We've cut back dramatically on our how much we're ordering. So back in the day, when I first opened up, I had probably 10, 15 plus over whatever our pulls are. I had a nice full stock, and I just don't do that anymore because the back bins tend to fill up pretty quick when you do that. So, you know, I wasn't one of those stores that was, you know, taking my 20 copies and putting them up. I have a tried and true policy of, if it's in your pull box, you get it at not only cover price, but typically whatever your discount is. And I absolutely honored that on 89 and Hellerism 3. That being said, if I have an idea that a book might, and just pure speculation, not any inside sources, but I think, oh, I know this is a new series written by a good person, I'm going to order 10 extra of those above and beyond what I normally would. Would I turn around and put them online for more? Sometimes, yeah, I will. As a store, and the reality is, man, we got to pay bills. So do I take both sides, not to be that guy, but I mean, it is what it is. You know, it's hard enough to sell some of these things, even at cover price. You know, you take a beating week in and week out, you know, just trying to get rid of the stock that you're essentially forced to buy, not only by Diamond, but by the consumers demanding that you have every title. To then expect a retailer to not take their one opportunity to try to get a little money recuperated, I think is a little, you know, unfair. And also, I think most of the people that are most vocal about it are the ones who are wanting to turn around and flip it. Because I don't hear very many people who are just reading this book going, oh man, I couldn't pick up my one copy. No, those aren't the people that are complaining. The people that are complaining are the ones that went to some shop they've never been to in their life and were mad at the shopkeeper, wouldn't give them 50 copies at cover price.
Have their profit margin taken out from underneath them.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, my shop policy is, and I hope every other shop policy is, you know, being loyal to your regulars, even if it's someone who didn't typically pull it. I know they're a Batman fan and it's a good title. I absolutely will give it to them at cover, if not cheaper. I do that with any title, I don't really get into that as much as I used to. I used to be one of the people who would follow these sites real quickly and see what I could maximize on. But honestly, your best, you know, bottom line thing is taking care of your customers. And yeah, you're not making your extra $10 on your book that day, but I've earned way more customers and way more loyalty and way more dollars in the long run doing it the way I've always done it. and that's just being good to my customers. And we will always do that and continue to do that. So at the same time, I understand why other stores do it. I'm just not in a position to ever capitalize because I don't have enough copies to do that with. So,
Nico, what do you think?
I don't know. You pick up on the merry-go-round what you lose on the swing, and a lot of comic book collectors are fucking crybabies. Here's my story with Batman 89 and Hell Arisen 3. I told everybody on the Comic Book Wars Facebook group, maybe before final order cut off, but I ordered 10 copies of each book before final order cut off, but I told everybody they should buy it. And there was this huge outcry that I was a moron. And then the books took off, and I got no copies. And then when they were selling for like $40, $50 a piece, I wrote on the Weekend Update, don't pay $40 or $50 for this comic. There's all these other great Batman books to invest in. And I don't begrudge, I didn't prepay for them. I sometimes give tips to people with diamond accounts, tell them to order books and order me this, order me that. And, I pay for what I order. And if they needed the money, they needed the money. Having a local shop is hard business. I don't know how anyone does it. And I try to support any local comic book shop that I can. I think smart business is rewarding valued customers, but that's a case-by-case circumstantial decision. Similarly, if a retailer orders books and they want to do whatever they want with them, it's their right. They don't have like an obligation to do the hard work of pre-ordering extra copies of hot books so that some idiot can run out and grab 5 off the shelf and make an extra $50 on eBay that week. I mean, it's silly to begrudge somebody for doing that hard work. So I don't have a local comic book shop. If I did, that would, go get them. Yeah, right. I would have I think I'm like, a lot of people have real strong opinions about things that they have no experience with. I try not to be one of those guys. I can kind of speculate about what I may do. But again, I think that's very circumstantial. One thing I do know from the con scene is that I reward loyal customers, and they reward me. Sometimes they buy things that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe anybody paid for that. Fantastic. And you pick up on the merry-go-round what you lose on the swing. Other times I'm like, man, I just let them rob me. But I try to keep it even. I don't know if that's karma or goodwill, but the one thing that I try to talk about every chance I get is our failed concerted effort to do good for the comic community, like to take care of the community, to treat other members of the community as our brothers, sisters, whatever, to engage in apprenticeships, to mentor younger collectors, to find mentors, to really just support independent authors, independent artists, as well as people who are, doing this professionally. I think if we love the hobby, then we've got to love the people in the hobby. And that means other collectors and the people, who are doing the hard work behind the scenes. So if we keep that, I think, in the forefront, then all the other stuff sort of falls in place.
So, Brian, you know where I'm going to go with this. Obviously, I have a bit of a counterpoint from both these guys, and I get where they're coming from. I've made my point a few times on the channel. I don't want to take that for granted, though, because I know that, thankfully, we really appreciated our first podcast. We were really blessed with the results of, and I know there's a lot of you listening out there in audio. So for anybody who hasn't heard, I am staunchly against any retail shop marking a regular release book. Variant covers are different, but a regular release book above cover price on release day, and furthermore, really release week. But my hard argument is for release day. And I understand immediately the backlash that I'm going to get from this. I understand what like Nico is saying about like the speculator running in there to get 5 copies. Yes, no, a retail shop doesn't owe that customer the ability to do that. That's where 1 per customer limits are absolutely essential. Secondly, the thing that I'm going to hear about is pull lists. Yeah, pull lists are great, but you have to ask yourself as a retailer, if it's all about the pull list, if your only customers were those who you have pulls with, could you keep the doors open? Can you make a living for yourself just off of your pull list customers and pull list customers alone? With what
And how many pull list customers don't come in and pick up their pull list books?
That was my next point is then anytime a retailer wants to talk about retailers going out of business, they immediately point back at those same pull list customers and say that the non-picking up of the pull lists is the reason why they are going out of business, which I can understand. I actually think pull lists are an antiquated, terrible system that doesn't benefit the retail shop at all. They get nothing in advance. They have to put out all of the risk and all of the money. But I know that retailers have expressed to me when I've brought that opinion up that when they've tried to buck that system, they end up losing out. My background is in retail. I went to college for retail. I've been a retailer for almost 20 years. I've managed small retail shops to large chains. I've done multi-location. I've broken a new brand in an area it never was. And my specialty has been sneakers for the last 15 years, which went through a renaissance kind of period of flippability. And I always kind of compare it to that. When we were one of the few places you could get Yeezys when they were first the hottest thing out. Yes, you could have bought them from us for $175 and immediately put them on eBay and sold them for $800. But if we would have marked them up to $800, which us being a mom and pop owned shop, we could have done. But if we would have done that, we would immediately have separated ourselves from every other retail shop like Foot Locker and Finish Line that didn't do that, that didn't take part in that practice, who thought bigger and more long term. And we would have not been able to penetrate the market the way we did over the first 5 years of our brand entering the southeastern United States. And it was because people started to know that they could come to our shop on release date of a hot product. We'd have it and we wouldn't mess with them on the price. And I implore stores to understand that the acquisition of a new customer is one of the most biggest expenses that your store is going to take part in. And it's not a fixed cost you're going to see every day. It's not the way you see your light bill or the way you see your diamond bill. And those pull list customers that you have, that you love, and I absolutely stay loyal to those who are loyal to you. If you do not grow them, you're not going to be able to stay in business. And the way you are going to grow them is by consistently being able to provide that service to your customer. And a hot book, I don't sit here and say this to you to say it as in like you're cheating anybody or anything like that. I'm actually employing retailers to try something different, a different strategy, instead of looking at it and saying, well, I can make, because I've often said, like, how much are we talking about? Even if you have 20 copies of Punchline, for you to make an extra $400, how many customers could you have acquired? How many new pull boxes could you set up if you sold 1 per customer and you talk to every customer that bought that? I don't have a problem with stores who take a hot book and attach other requirements. Like, you want Batman 89, you got to spend $20 in the store. Or you want Batman, there was a store that got publicity because if they sold Hell Arisen 3, you had to buy Hell Arisen 1 and 2. I don't have a problem with that. Those are creative solutions to this problem. But the worst, I understand Ben taking a book and putting it online. That's even a little different. The worst thing you can do, I feel like, to a customer is have a customer walk in and you've got that book up on the shelf for $25 in their face that day when they're expecting to pay for it. And the other thing that I think we're doing too much as a hobby is assuming, because we're becoming jaded, that every person that walks into our store that isn't a pull list customer is suddenly out to flip a book and make a buck, because sometimes they're just new to your area. Sometimes they're just, checking out a different shop because they just had a bad experience at their shop. We have new people coming into our hobby every day. And that's really the problem. Is I don't see a lot of them able to come in. And what is going to bring them in? A hot book talked about all over media. Batman 89 is an opportunity for you to get new customers. And if you don't get hype about that, if as a retailer, that doesn't charge you up and go, man, yeah, I hope 3 or 4 new people are going to start ordering from me so that the next time, you know, a big book comes out, they're going to pre-order it. You know, then I feel like we're missing the boat, because you're never going to be able to stay in business long-term with an extra $60, $80, $100, $200. That's just not, these books don't happen often enough for you to be able to stay in business just because of that. So the argument when I get, is it a free country? Yes. Is it, you know, you have the freedom to sell whatever you want for whatever you want. That's your choice as a business. I get that. The free enterprise, I get that. I'm just imploring you to think about it differently, because I want to see retail shops be successful, and I don't want to see them continuing to repeat these mistakes and then have to do things that cannibalize themselves in the name of survival in business. If we're just doing what we're supposed to do, then these shops should be able to thrive in what is really a boom market in the comic book kind of market right now. It's a boom time period.
Well, that was a lot to digest. And I think pretty much we're all on the same page here. So I have never put a book up on my shelf for more than cover. That would be really asking for it. My store is up in Maine. So one thing that is a benefit to me is that we don't get the type of traffic that, say, a shop in New York would. So pretty much if you're coming into my shop, I know who you are, basically, kind of deal. I do get new customers all the time, and I think that's why my shop in particular and my whole state is growing the way that we are, is because we truly do treat everyone who comes in, whether it's for that hot book or not, because more often than not, like you said, is not the case. Like they're someone that's valued. In fact, one of the biggest collections I just took in recently was from an older woman. It was an unfortunate situation where she was trying to help out a family member who, had passed, and they were raising as much money as they possibly could. I won't get into the details, but we were able to acquire, after a lot of back and forth and guiding her on how to maximize her profit without even any interest in purchasing it from her, was able to turn her into a customer and be able to acquire the books at a fair price and get her a fair price. And, that's really our motto. And our motto, even beyond just the hot book thing, is just customer service, which honestly I think is something that maybe some of the more high-end stores are starting to figure out and operate like. There's a lot of these comic shops that are just dirty and, dark, and they've got that clique mentality still that they had back in the 70s and 80s, where it was, if you weren't part of the club, you weren't welcome there. And for us, we're all inclusive. I don't care who you are. You come in, I'm going to treat you just like, my biggest customer in the store. We truly live that way. And I think that's one reason we've grown so fast. We've actually been trying to do that as much as we possibly can online. And we've run into where we grew so fast. It's been hard to keep up with online email, especially I handwrite all my emails. You email me, I'll probably email back to you the same day, with a paragraph or two. I do that by myself. I work 24/7, and I truly try to give everyone that experience. So, thankfully at our store, we do live that type of mentality. So I'm not even really concerned about the hot books. Like I said, I wish I ordered 1 million of them and it was the capitalized, but that's not really how we do business. And we certainly wouldn't ever put that up on the shelf. I think in our area, we're so small that if I did that, I'd be closed down pretty darn quick. Because, I can imagine how that must feel as a consumer, seeing that book that you should be able to get at $3.99 at $25, $30, $50. Like, what? You know what they're doing. You're just saying I'm sleazy when you do that. At the same time, in our back bins, if we've got a book that's getting hot, at what point do you do the cutoff of, you could say, like the first week, which is totally reasonable. It's a new release, right? Like the market hasn't really truly decided what its value is yet. If it's been 6 months, at that point, if something starts getting valuable, is that now the value? You know what I'm saying? So like at what time?
In my feeling is after a week, it's a back issue. After a week, it's not the new release. You should be free to do what you want
Right.
with the book and price it how you want. But that's really my argument, is that new release books are supposed to be the first market. You're the first one. You're the direct market. So you're the direct way that consumers have to go about getting these comic books. And if you're selling it at the secondary market price, you're skipping the first market altogether, which in turn circumvents actually what your role in the hobby is, which you really don't want to do long term, because you want people to be accustomed to coming to you and you being that first market. Because if they're going to get it from you at eBay price, they can get it on eBay at eBay price. And then that's the death knell of stores ultimately.
I got calls all across the country, by the way, for that. Guy calling me from Kentucky I've never heard from in my life. Hey, and they always play it so casual too, which is always hilarious because you can tell instantly what they're calling for. You happen to have what was it? Batman 89. Yeah, that's it. You happen to have a few copies. Can I get 10? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll mail you the rose right out.
Yeah,
So,
I loved seeing the social media posts of shops putting up the "We don't have Batman 89" signs in the window. I see that in the sneaker business because we sell out by 8 a.m. of a popular sneaker first thing in the morning, and then you get calls all afternoon for do you have? So
no, but do you want me to set you up a click?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So me, as a buyer, if I'm going into the comic book store and a new release is jacked up the price, if I don't want to buy it, I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to say one thing to go across all of it, because own your results. That's all I'm going to say is I don't have a problem if you're the comic book store and you want to, hey, there's a hot book, I'm going to sell it for however many. That's fine. Own your results. If you lose your customer base, that's what free market capitalism is. If you're the buyer, if you want to pay that much for it, by all means, pay for it. Own your results. Don't cry afterwards that, hey, this book dropped in value, or don't cry, hey, sorry, we're going to have to close our doors. We don't have any comic book customers. Do what you want to do. That's what market capitalism is. Just own your results. Me personally, if I go in, I'm not going to buy it for that much unless I absolutely, really, really want that book. If the risk is worth it for me, or I don't care how much it costs, I want it in my collection, I'll spend that much. I personally will not pay that much for a book, especially a Batman cover A, 89. I will never pay that much. But do what you want to do. It's a free, that's what makes the country great. That's what makes everything great. But I agree with everyone's point of view. At the end of the day, just own your results and then move on. Because we hear both of it. Everyone wants to speak on everyone's opinions, or everyone wants to speak on, oh, you're just saying that because you don't have a pull list, or you don't run a comic book store, or you're just saying that because do what you want to do. Just own the results of it. And that's our 4 topics for tonight. But real quick before we go, I also want to thank Ben and Nico. So Ben, starting with you, what do you have coming up at Black Cape Comics? Where can people find you? We'll put links to all your social in the description of this video, same with Nico. But tell us what you got coming up, what you guys are working on.
All right. Well, yeah. So biggest thing next in a couple weeks, we're going to ACE in Boston. So please, if you're listening to this and you're in the area and you're going to be at ACE, come to our booth, come check us out, come say hi, meet us. Check out any exclusives we've got going on, as well as our key backstock and all that. You can find us on any social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We did start a YouTube channel as well. So please, if you aren't subscribed to that, come check us out. We'll always keep you up to date on what we've got going on with the shop. We like to try to do some fun stuff, and we've got actually a fun series. I won't say until it's actually launched, starting on that channel. But think maybe Drunk History, but different. So that'll be fun. And then start a pull list. Hit me up. We can use Diamond if you want. I've got access to the beta version of their program you can use, or we can always just do a old school. You email me a list. As I alluded to, any pre-order you do with me, I will never take from. unlike other shops, and I've been doing that since day one. So pre-orders are important for us. I will, like I said, only order so many copies of something. I'd love to be able to order 100 copies of everything, but it's just not realistic. So if there's something you want, make sure you hit me up. We take our packaging very seriously too. We package it just like we would like our stuff packaged. We take a lot of time doing that by hand. Taking that little bit of extra time and putting it together well. So social media, see what we got going on. Website, blackcapecomics.com. Oh, speaking of that, we actually just switched service providers. I've been working with an IT company for about a year and a half, and unfortunately that's been kind of souring. So we just switched over to Shopify. So our website is completely being redone. So it's going to be a little under construction for a while, but we've already got it mostly up. And we're going to have a lot more availability for products and shipping and things. So things are going to get a lot better on the site, but you'll be able to find all our products right on there.
Awesome. Nico, where can we find you? I'll tell you what, if you're watching online right now, we're putting a card up on the screen right now that'll link you to Nico's YouTube channel, as well as it'll be in the description. But what do you got going on? Tell us about your site. Tell us about your videos.
Yeah, I'm Nico, your weekend update correspondent with comicbookspeculation.com. Every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m., you can find me with the one and only James Lamborghini, a.k.a. Jimmy Linguini, and Sleepy John on Comic Book Wars. Almost every weekend, I do interviews on Nico Time, a lot of which I think are pretty timeless. I've been real lucky to have Dinesh Shamdashani from Bad Idea. I think he announced the publishing of that imprint live on the show. Steve Borak from CBCS and J.C. Bond from Overstreet, some real greats in the industry. Representatives of Heritage and a lot of great speculators, Gary Nusser and others. And then again, every Friday evening, you'll find my weekend update, which is my sort of take on the comic book market and where we're at and where we're headed. I may throw out some books, but I encourage you to go back and check my results. Rewind the tape. I think you could make some money if you did that. It was really a joy to be here, guys. I had an even better time than I anticipated. This is a great concept. I love the way you do the round the horn, and I hope I get an invite back sometime soon.
Yeah, I also think if you guys watch college football at all, you might be familiar with the term home and home. So we've had Nico on here. So I think eventually we're going to end up on Nico Time as well. Isn't that right, Jack and Nico?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we got to do that.
All right, sweet. That makes me very excited. I get like a little kid with these interviews. You saw my, yeah.
Well, we always talk on, we've always talked on Facebook Messenger, Instagram DMs. And so it's just like, hey, let's just put it all together. I'm glad both Ben and Nico, I'm glad you guys were able to come on tonight. I think we had a great episode of this podcast. Great topics. I love getting it from Nico's point of view as well as Ben, especially with Ben. You having a unique point of view because you have skin in the game also. I mean, you have inventory, you have the overhead, you run a comic book store, but great topics. Let us know in the comments also, what do you guys think about these topics? How do you feel about it? I mean, that's the point of this show is we're not all sitting here being comfortable. We want to hear that debate. We want to hear that conversation. Let's get the juices flowing. Let people, kind of just talk it out and talk about the comic community. That's what makes the hobby the hobby.
Yeah, I just want to, I want to thank Ben. Brian and I have been big fans of Black Cape Comics and what they do. We root for that brand to do well. Major player in independent comics, which obviously is at the core of so much of what we do here with the Simpleman's Comics YouTube channel. And, thank God, Brian, for our independence, because we wanted to have Nico on the channel for a long, long time. Affiliation sometimes made that difficult, but hopefully this is the beginning of a future being able to work together in the future, going forward. So thank you guys for joining us when we were planning out this. This wasn't an accident. You guys were definitely targeted guests. So, and definitely pleased with how everything turned out.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. We're working really, really hard to get our name out there. There's still so many people that don't even know we exist. I get it all the time, even at my local shop, new people coming in like you were talking about. Oh, I didn't know this was here. Same thing online. People don't know we exist, and we're working really hard, specifically on that independent front. Also, Source Point Press, if you're not familiar with them, please go check them out. They put out good stuff all the time, but they're not the only ones. But I'd be happy to come back anytime. So all you got to do is send me an invite, and I'll be happy to come back.
So again, thanks to Ben and Nico. This is Brian and Jack of Simpleman's Comics, and this has been the latest episode of Simpleman's Comics and Friends.